All right, welcome everybody. I'm Alec Broadfoot. I am the visionary of Vision Spark, and we have with us here Emily Morgan, the visionary for Delegate Solutions, and Shannon Waller. You are a top dog at Strategic Coach here and very innovative. And we are so happy that you're here with us today. Shannon is going to kick us off just to remind us what the Who Not How concept is. So Shannon, why don't you kick us off?
All right, let's do this. Thanks everyone for joining. Alec and Emily and I love having this conversation, and we love having you join us. And thank you, by the way, for all of your amazing comments and questions. We're gonna get to some key ones as we go through. But some of you really wanted clarity on just going a little bit deeper with the Who Not How concept. So we will be exploring some different elements of that as we go through. But basically the premise of Who Not How came out of a conversation that Dan Sullivan was having with the wonderful Dean Jackson on what was then called their Joy of Procrastination podcast. And it's like, why do people procrastinate? And one of the things that came out of their conversation and that Dean said is that, well, one of the reasons I procrastinate is because when I go to do something, I'm involved in the how. And if it's something I don't already know how to do, it is de-energizing, it's hard. I know when I do it, I go to the bottom of the learning curve, not the top. And so it looks like a lot of effort. And again, it's taxing. It kind of drains us. He said, instead, I have learned to find a who knows how to do the how. It was like, this is incredible. And all of us have learned through our own companies, through any training we've had, that we need to delegate. We're supposed to do that. It's always felt like a chore. It's always felt hard and very tough to trust someone with your baby. Parts and tasks of your company. They're so meaningful, and you know how you would do them, and you know the quality standards you want them to get done to. But it's hard to pass that off. But all of a sudden, when you look at finding a who, it's much more expansive. Your results happen faster. Your strategy then just becomes really, how do you really get clear on your bigger, better future that you're looking for? How can you articulate that well to the person? And then they're usually off and running. And here's the really phenomenal thing about finding the right who, because this is essentially another way to talk about our unique ability concept, is they love it and are better at it than you are. Yay. It's all good. So you have the idea, and then you have this team around you. And what's interesting is your future gets much, much bigger, much faster. If we stay stuck with just the things that we're good at doing, or the things that we invest 5, 10, 15, 20 years at doing that are kind of hard slogging, our future stays pretty small. There's a limited amount to which any one human can pull off. If you want your future to get bigger, you actually have to get good at this Who Not How concept. And frankly, it's a lot easier. It's a lot more fun. Get a lot more time off when you employ this. So it's just a little flip in our mind from being a rugged individual where the mindset is here, I have to do it myself, into what we call unique teamwork, which is that we can do it better together. So the Who Not How is really that pivot point where you just get very, very excited about your idea, clearly articulate it, define what the success criteria are, spell out the best and worst. Here's the purpose, importance, ideal outcome of this project. Here's the best case scenario if we just really, maximize it. Here's the worst case scenario if we do it poorly or we don't take action. A lot of times maintaining the status quo is actually intolerable. So there's a really powerful reason to take action on it. And then you simply lay out the success criteria for how to do so. And for those of you that are familiar with Coach, yes, I am talking about the impact filter. So really having a clear way to do the handoff is key, and then finding the right who. But we have a fabulous group of people here who both know how to find and to provide who's. So I'm excited to have this, dynamic trio of people to do that. Now, Emily, it was really fun as we were planning for this event. You have some of your own stories about whoing yourself up. By the way, this does end up sounding like a Dr. Seuss novel after a while, which is really quite fun. We'd like to have fun with it. So Emily, can you share you've done this quite recently, actually, because you just published a book, which is incredible. And so talk about your, Who Not How, howing it up for yourself. I'm curious to hear what the story is.
Thank you. Well, delegation is my jam. It's my favorite thing to talk about, my favorite thing to do. And being able to prompt myself by saying, wait, who should I have do this instead of how should I do this is definitely like a transformational trigger way to think about this. for me, I got very ambitious with my content in the last quarter. So I was putting out an e-workbook. I decided to write an actual book, and I'm launching like a delegation mini course. And, you know, I had all this energy and excitement about it, but I realized I don't have the capacity, interest, or ability within myself or my team to execute on a lot of this stuff to make it great. So first I checked myself. So I use an impact filter and a strategy circle to just kind of make sure that I felt really good about what I was going to start to delegate. So those tools are amazing. And then from there, I identified who I needed to hire. So in my case, I hired a graphic designer to design my ebook. I hired a training consultant to help us take the ebook and turn it into modules in a workshop. And then I hired a marketing consultant to help me figure out how I'm going to market and get butts and seats to come to the trainings. And then lastly, I hired Scribe. So I've been working with Scribe to write my master book, which has been a great who for me because, you know, I know how to write, but I don't know how to publish a book. So, you know, that's just a sampling of the different who's that I was able to find just to get myself going with this type of project.
That's amazing. And I mean, what you said about got ambitious about my content. I love every part of that sentence, by the way. And that's the thing. Now, how long, and you pulled off all of these things that I'm aware of, and you did this in what period of time? What's the difference that it would have taken if you were to do this all yourself?
Well, I don't have the ability or knowledge to do it myself. So I'm not trained as a teacher. Like I actually found someone that this is what they do. They create learning modules for you and they make it like interactive and amazing resource for that type of solution. So I started my ebook probably a couple months ago, and it went live a couple weeks ago, and our e-course goes live at the end of June. And then my book will be published within a year. So
yeah.
Well,
and I think what you just said is really important to remember. If we're going to have these big ambitions, and you probably wouldn't be here unless you did, for everyone who's attending, is that there's some things we actually it's not our jam. It's not what we're put here to do. It's not our unique ability, but we have these things we want to get out into the world. And so when you start to realize, instead of having to do the how yourself outside of what is your jam, and you can put this team together, you get our success criteria for results is we want it faster, easier, cheaper, and bigger result. Yeah. And you did all of those things by investing in and having confidence in your ideas and your ambitions and wanting to make it happen. And you did. Like some of those things may never have happened or would have taken forever if you hadn't done that. So kudos. That's an awesome story.
Yeah. And I teach delegation as an energy management system. And like a lot of those things, I have no energy around. So it's like, why would I even want to tackle figuring out how to put a training program together? Like I care about the content and the experience, and I'm providing the vision around how that's going to play out. But I don't have time to sit there and outline a course structure that would make sense.
And I think that's actually what a lot of people find. That want a lot of the questions around how do I do this? And talking about its energy management is kind of profound. And it's totally in alignment with coaches thinking too. It's like, well, what we have energy for is so clear. And it's usually a few things, in our unique ability model is unique, excellent, competent, incompetent. It's kind of actually relates to the number of things that are in the circles. Unique ability, there's a few things that we'd love to do and are passionate about, and that we are actually put here to do. We have a big impact, we make a big difference. Most of the other parts of it, not so much. And so when you when you reach that level of energy, we have a expression called stay on your side of the line. The line is, well, first of all, that keeps you from getting into trouble and ticking off other people, just saying. But the other part of it is it's also when you start to lose energy. And that's a massive, only you are the expert on that. And you have to be conscious of it, be aware, have discretion, and pay attention. All of that's true. But when you're like, when you get to the point, you're like, oh, you'd love to do this. You can't wait to get at it. And then you have another task and you're like, it might be subtle, but it's there. And that's really the clue that you need to know. So energy management is such a profound way to talk about that, Emily. Yeah. Alec, why don't you jump in? Because a lot of questions came up around how do I find good who's?
Yeah.
So that's something that you are passionate about.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. If you are saying, how do I find who's, you're really asking the wrong question. So the question
Perfect.
should be, who
Yes.
do I know that can find who's, right?
You're
So
a who finder, Alec.
yeah, yep. And there are other who finders out there. And there are things you can do to help you. So if you feel like you are the who, it's so important that you take time to evaluate what success looks like. What do you want in this position? The impact filter is a great tool for determining what success looks like. And you can look at resume and what you want. But what's really important are identifying what we call the who, which are behaviors, traits, and values. And so by writing those things down, if you're looking for a salesperson, you know, they're outgoing and gregarious and customer oriented. Or if you're looking for an executive assistant, they're organized and detailed. Those things are super important. And what that does, if you do it well, it's going to attract the right people and it's going to repel the wrong ones. But the whole exercise, in the end, you're going to have a blueprint of who you're looking for, and you could evaluate talent there. If you do it well, it will attract the right people. So in terms of finding who's, we had a lot of people comment, how do I find the who's? So number one, write a really good narrative and then promote it, advertise. I have found that with our clients, with some of the people I've met, they get a little bit cheap when it comes to marketing for who's. They will advertise and spend money on search engine optimization and salespeople to grow their business. But when it comes to spending a few dollars on some ads, they're like, oh, that's a lot of money. But if you had a stellar who, if you had someone that could, this investment, you could have 10x rewards on it, you would definitely spend the money. So, and promote the position, be very aggressive on your email signature, on job boards, social media. So those are my 2 cents on finding who's. And there was another question on there. A couple of people said, how can I be confident in the decision? And that's really using the right tools. And so behavioral interviewing, group interviewing, assessments, experts, those all can help you feel confident in that.
That's really interesting. I want to kind of reflect a little bit more on what you said about people need to be willing to invest. This is not the time to get cheap about finding your who's.
Mm-hmm.
And that a little bit goes to a mindset, I think. And it relates to one that what we have at Coach as well, which is do you treat team members as investments or costs? And if you treat people as costs, well, first of all, what does any savvy person, I was going to say business person, but truthfully in life too, what are we supposed to do with our costs? Minimize them. We want to maximize, we want to minimize our costs and maximize our return. But no human being wants to be minimized. So there's a massive danger with that way of thinking. Instead, what you want to think about, at least how I think you would agree, Alec, is we want to treat people as investments. And the
Absolutely.
search for good who's is also an investment.
Yes.
Right? And then you want to maximize that. I'm very happy to be maximized. Please maximize me. That will make me very happy. Do not minimize me. We will not get along well. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's such a great concept, because if you think about if you want to invest in the stock market, you're going to research what the best stock is. So let's say after research, you find that Apple is a great stock, and you put $50,000 and you buy Apple stock, and you'd have a good year if you ended the year with $60,000, right? So you made $10,000, but it cost you $50,000. But if you take that same funds and you can invest in a great executive assistant or in Delegate solutions to free up your time, you're going to get much higher return. You're going to get 3, 4, 5, 10x return on the right person.
Yes, exactly. And my own just quick share about this, and I may have told this story before, but when I hired my personal assistant, which I don't call her that because she's way more strategic support partner is the term that we came up with, which totally is customized to her, by the way. But I knew I wanted a partner. I wanted someone who was supportive, and she's very strategic. So that's how that came together. But I counted up the number of things I get done, and it is usually triple, sometimes quadruple to what I was doing before. Well, especially for the investment people make in me, that's a big return, right? So you can totally, I mean, there's a business case scenario for that. And I think there's a mindset shift, but when people make it, it's like, it's kind of incredible in terms of what happens. I'm going to quickly address one of the concerns that came up, which is what happens if you get the wrong who. And so most of you are just desperate to find good who's. So this will be a brief conversation. If you have an entrepreneurial company, which everyone does, make sure they have an entrepreneurial attitude. That's what the Team Success Handbook is about. But I wrote another book because what had happened was someone had been with the company for a long time. I went to meet with them. I was doing some work on site with their team, and I met the second in command. And this is a person, as we were meeting about future vision and the coaching session I was about to do, clearly had a different attitude. And I could see it, but the owner could not. And after, in a conversation right after that, I said to him, I don't think this guy's really bought into what we're talking about. Oh, no, he's great. He's got a fabulous education. He's got a great history. He's really kind of the future of our company. I was like, all right, but I'm not feeling it. And then two years later, after I'd worked with them, mostly fun, somewhat painfully, he said, you know that conversation we had 2 years ago about, I won't mention the person's name. He said, you were right. And I was like, told you. It's really frustrating. And this was a high performing team leader with the wrong value system. So it's actually what inspired. I tend to write books when I get frustrated, not when I'm inspired. I've learned. But I heard it happened more than once. It's not the only reason to let go of someone. But the bottom line is, especially if you've just hired someone, that's actually really easy. And I wrote the book in terms of what to look for and symptoms and what's the result, especially not only on the company, but on other team members when you have a wrong fit person, how to know whether or not someone is simply in the wrong seat, and how you can move them around. And then finally, if it's not a right fit, if it's new, that's a 1 out of 5 level of difficulty. They've been there for 20 years. A legacy employee is more like a 6 out of a 5 level of difficulty. But ultimately, it's about a 50. Once you've got your ducks in a row, talk to your lawyer. It's about a 15-minute conversation. So it's not that hard. And my goal is to give people confidence that to move people around, pay attention, don't ignore the little whispers, help people be a right fit in your company, or if it's not, how to gracefully exit them. So I kind of want to encourage you that don't let that stop you from attracting great who's. It is it's not fun letting someone go, or releasing them back to the marketplace is another expression that I've heard. And to stack the odds in your favor, hire someone like Alec, or even, one of the other big questions, Emily, that you're going to talk about is you don't even have to hire them. You can hire someone who's already hired them, which is kind of amazing, which is the whole idea of fractional. So that takes a lot of the risk out. So Emily, can you talk about, fractional team members? Because that's your area of expertise that I know some people are very curious about.
Yeah, I think it's less of a struggle if you're working on a who to go down a fractional path, if what it is can accommodate that. So in my case, the training consultant, the graphic designer, those are all fractional type people. They're not somebody that I need to do a big profile on, but we want to hire a salesperson. So we're using Vision Spark to really help us figure out how that is going to work, because we've never hired for that role before. So I think there's opportunity to use both models, employee versus fractional. But when it comes to fractional, at least what we do, it's important to think about volume of work. So is it every day, every week? How many hours do you think you need help? Is it repeatable? It's important to think about urgency. That's the number one thing that is different in a fractional hire, is like, how much urgency are you wanting them to handle? Because In our case, we work with people administratively 1 to 2 hours a day. So if there's like last minute meeting requests or things like that, that doesn't work with a fractional model, but it can really fill a need, especially now that we've all moved remote. This idea that it can be done remotely, like for my business, it changed overnight. For like 14 years, I'm fighting this battle about coming to work on site. I'm like, we don't need to do that. And then all of a sudden, everybody's embraced it. So, it's been a transformational year for everyone. And I think as employers, thinking about a fractional way of solving some of these problems alleviates a lot of the stress of like turnover or finding the wrong who, because hey, guess what? If you hire my company and we give you the wrong who, we manage all of that. You don't have to think about transitions and you wake up and somebody's quit. It's our problem.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would love for that headache to go away.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time. Well, that's really, it's cool that you actually have hired that. And I want to talk about the urgency because I think that's actually pretty interesting. And here's what I know is that I used to be, I'm if anyone's familiar with another profile, Colby, which is different measures, it's very complementary to the achiever profile, which I love. And I'm a 2 in what's called follow through. So my mental energy for finishing, now I'm very good at adapting in the moment, but my mental energy for planning is very short and happens at the last minute. Then I'm like, oh, I really need this and this, right? Makes me very adaptable, but planning is not something that my brain does naturally or easily. And so, but what I've noticed is when I do work with someone who does have that planning capacity, my sense of urgency has gone down.
Interesting.
I am on my own. I create a ton of urgency because I just remembered it, right? But when I'm actually working with someone, that urgency has, so if I'm working with someone 1 to 2 hours a day, which I actually am right now, then it's actually pretty easy. Very few random things pop up. Things get calmer. And if you told me, 8 or 9 years ago before I started working with Nicole, I would have been shocked. I would have thought because I'd worked this way for 25 years, I wouldn't have thought that was actually possible for me to be less like that. But it's kind of amazing how things calm down when you have that consistent support in place. You work with a lot of strategic coach clients, Emily. So have you guys seen that as well?
Yeah. And I think the last kind of thing that I wanted to touch on today was really about, don't just put your trust in the who. Yeah. It has to be a mix of the who and the system, because otherwise you're going to wake up with a big void if for some reason the who doesn't work out. And especially in this market, when it comes to hiring, really complicated. So definitely when you're talking about an admin solving for a who, what are they working on every day? What's happening every Monday? Making sure that those processes are captured so you don't find yourself in a really bad spot in the future. So just keep that in mind. That has to be an equal balance with your who.
Yeah, and the process also really protects you, because if someone does leave or does swap out, or you need to pass off a task to somebody else, if there's no process, it's really challenging. Now, we just had a really talented person leave who I loved, but she went to a new opportunity. She gets, promotion just to build her own team. I'm super happy for her. And fortunately, she had a lot of follow through energy and she documented everything, like everything. Yeah. She loved doing that. That's actually how her brain works. And it's such a blessing, because then the next person can just pick it up and go. Now, do they understand everything or all the ramifications? No, there's always more context, but all of the steps, if she follows them, or he could be, will not fail. So having those steps documented, it means in how we've talked about it, and we actually had a business valuation expert say, because we document our processes, although keeping up to date is a bit of work, I will say. He said, when you've documented your process, normally all of your company wisdom walks out the door at 5 o'clock at night. When you have documented your processes, you literally have doubled the value of your company. Yes. So I cannot stress enough, Emily, that point about having documented, we call them methods, of ways of doing things that are transferable, huge. Mm-hmm. So that's something to think about. And for those of us that are not naturally sequential, find someone who does. Do not try and do that yourself. It won't work. Your processes will be 3 steps long and no one will understand what you're talking about. So find a who to help document your processes. And there are natural talents out there for that. So yes, yes, and yes. Yeah. Is my thought about that. Great.
We have about 5 minutes left. Alec or Shannon, did you guys have anything else you wanted to cover? Or do you want to open up for questions?
Let's open it up for questions. And as people are writing in questions, I want to share a little bit of my experience. Some entrepreneurial companies are wanting to hire a part-time person. They don't want to take the risk in a full-time person.
Mhm.
And part-time individuals tend to be less reliable. They will plan their they'll plan their work around their life rather than the opposite. And so if you're thinking of a part-time individual, one of two things: a fractional organization like Delegate is better suited for that, or make the leap and hire a full-time individual. So it's very costly in most cases to hire a part-time individual. So consider fractional or full-time.
Yeah, Alec, just a quick story. I very nerve-wrackingly hired a part-time person, my very first hire a long time ago. And it was 3 weeks later, I asked, how soon can you go full-time? So when you have the right who, the leverage is profound, and you'll be like, oh no, now I need them. So you kind of, if I didn't have the courage, but it only took 3 weeks for me to get it. But hiring that full-time person, when you actually get the right one, you don't want to live without them.
So that's great. There's a question in the chat that it's at one point, and this is from Emily Smith. At what point in an income for your business do you think you should hire, and how does one fully start without hiring? It feels like a chicken and egg problem. So you want to start the hiring process early. So sales usually moves up linear, and your costs in hiring are fixed. So they're like a stair step. So there's a point where you're growing, and there's the difference between your cost and your sales is the greatest, right? You have profit, but also it's often where you have the biggest pain point. That's where your sleepless nights, you're working extra hard. And so you want to avoid that, because when you're in pain, you make bad decisions. So you want to start the hiring process early, and your investment is so much less than later. So a few $100s, a few hours of time. And if sales decide to change, or you change your mind, you've only given up a little bit. So that's my answer for Emily.
Yeah. And I just want to add into that. If you think about it, you're not making to go back to your number, Alec, a $50,000 investment all at once, as though you put something in the stock market. It's every 2 weeks, and you have control over the outcome. You can make a decision after a month or 2 months or 3. So the amount of risk that you're taking is actually small, and please start way sooner than you think, because you have a particular unique ability, and which is where you're going to have the biggest impact and the most money-making ability. Please back yourself up with capable people to do all that other stuff, or your growth will actually be slower. So, Emily, you wrote, every time you've hired, you've grown in your company. Yes. Not stress that enough. Okay.
Yep. That's awesome.
Congratulations, Mike. Mike rents his CEO and head of HR for strategic direction. Very cool, Mike. Love that.
And I see one in here about, I need a who for 2 roles in my company, and I'm currently in those seats. How do you make the decision from the financial standpoint?
Alec, do you want to grab that one?
Yeah. I don't know if they're asking which one. Maybe they need to hire both, and they don't know which one they can afford. So
Right.
I would, I find that people will often underhire, especially if they're in a growing company. So they'll, maybe hire a part-time position, or instead of just going big, or they'll say, I need a full-time executive assistant, when they really need someone to run their business, right? They tend to go short. So so I think you just need to, what I would encourage you to do is to put yourself ahead in time, 6 months, a year, and look backwards and say, okay, I just hired this position. What am I going to gain from that? Or I hired this one. What am I going to gain from that? And so that could be a clarifying question. Maybe take a clarity break and answer those questions. Talk to your financial advisors to see which would be the best investment.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you. This time always goes by so fast.
So fast. Yeah. We have time for one more, don't we?
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, Here's a great question from Todd. How do you apply WhoNotHow to joint ventures and strategic relationships? Oh,
Great question.
can I jump in with this one?
Mhm.
Because this is actually, Todd, what you've tapped into is what Dan Sullivan talks about in a lot in our free zone program, but we talk about it in all of them, which is, potential collaborators. So with whom do you want to collaborate? And there are a couple of key things, but very much they need to be the right who's. You're not hiring them to be a part of your company, but you are partnering with them to make a difference to your audience. So a couple of the success criteria that we've come up with or that have come out of the Free Zone Frontier program is you need to both want to be a hero to the same audience, to the same type of person. We've also found that you kind of need to share value systems. So you need to want to be a hero and you need to really love that audience. If you don't love that, both of you love it, then you won't care about it. You won't understand what we call their dangers, their opportunities, and their strengths. You won't be looking to solve their problems. The other criteria that we find that's really important for strategic partnerships is it can't just all be about the money. It has to be about creating value. It has to be about being a hero. Cash is a phenomenal byproduct of having a positive impact on somebody else. But if that's your reason, if that's someone's reason for going in, pretty much doomed to not be successful. You're always going to be haggling. So cash confidence would be another success criteria for a great strategic partnership if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Time went by fast.
Yes, we are just having fun. What I love that. Todd, just a quick answer. We have 3 different levels of strategic coach program. The first one, and this is the starting point for everyone, is called the signature program. So it's how all of our clients have grown exponentially in the program. After 1 year of that, you could jump into, keep going in that forever if you want. Then you can also join the 10X Ambition program, Emily, which you're a part of. And then after at least a minimum year in that, maybe longer, then you might want to go into the free zone. So you definitely want to have that cash confidence we've talked about. And then it's not really about competition, it's about collaboration. And people who were formerly that you would look at as being your competitors actually become your collaborators, or they in fact become your audience for who you can serve, which is really kind of a very elevated state of entrepreneurship when you are now free zone refers to being free of competition. So if that's your end goal, that is a fabulous destination to shoot for. So quick answer on that one.
Awesome.
All right.
Emily, anything about your new ebook that may be helpful for the people watching here?
Thank you. Yeah. So we have an e-workbook. It's all about delegation. It's about how to delegate, what to delegate, and how to put a system in place to delegate really well. It's free download on our website, and it's got a lot of exercises. You work through it. We took that ebook, we're turning it into an e-course, which will start at the end of June, where we're calling it the Elevation Quarter, where we're spending the whole quarter. It's 6 sessions over 3 months, working on delegation activities. My team is facilitating it, and we're super excited about it.
It's an awesome workbook. I read through it. I'm like, oh, if you have like no confidence about being good at this, please download this, do the course, because you'll feel so much smarter at the end. It will be amazing. So
it's meant to be very much about mindset, and I can put it in this channel here for the chat.
Okay, perfect. And Alec, if people want to get in touch with you and Vision Spark, what do they do?
Yeah, they could reach out to me or Kate at Vision Spark if you want to email Kate at vision-spark.com. And we have a hiring with confidence checklist. So maybe we could make that available for everyone attending as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to go ahead, Ellie.
We'll send everything out in the email with the recording later, any resources that we mentioned today.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah, and strategiccoach.com. I went to the resources section, and there are acres of things you can check out and things you can click on if you want time management, if you want delegation, if you want ambition coaching, all of that is there. And then also fun books on your team success, the team success handbook and multiplication by subtraction, all about getting the right who's, keeping the right who's, making sure they're in the right seat, or exiting them gracefully if it's not. So other resources too. This was really great, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who joined us. Some of you are repeat attenders. We love seeing you, and we'll keep you posted if we do this again.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.